Hello, everyone. So fun to be here. Okay, as we've already established, my name is Victoria Harrison, but some of my closest friends call me Vic. And again, as we've already established, I have spent the last 15 years of my life working to build a nonprofit, the nonprofit called Charity Water, alongside my husband, Scott. And about 5 years ago, I left. I had 2 babies and recently launched a new venture. So now I work with purpose-driven entrepreneurs on brand strategy. And I personally believe that human beings are meaning-making machines, and that's what I want to talk to you today about. All of us here are in the business of marketing and building brands, and I believe that because human beings crave meaning in our lives, in all of our lives, so much, we all have a responsibility to build brands that mean something to the world. So to start, I want to take you back when I was about 23 years old. I went to School of Visual Arts in New York City, and I thought my life was going perfectly well. I was in college, and after junior year, I took a summer internship with a small budding design house in New York called Superfad. They're no longer around, so don't Google them. But after that internship was over and that summer was over, my boss said, "You're going to learn so much more on the job with me than you will in the 4 walls of a classroom. Why don't you come and work for me full time?" And so while all of my college classmate friends were still writing their senior thesis, I got to walk the halls of the most legendary marketing agencies, I would say, in our lifetime in New York. I got to sit in brainstorms with creative directors from organizations like Saatchi and Ogilvy and White & Kennedy, and I just couldn't believe my luck. I thought, I have made it. I'm going to become a creative director someday with a corner office like Don Draper from Mad Men, and I'm going to be this hotshot rock star marketing person. And for about the first year of that career, of that job, it was the most glamorous thing I'd ever seen. And if you guys have been to the kind of big legendary ad agencies in New York, there is just food and massage rooms and just like there's sleeping beds. It's amazing. And for a 23-year-old, all that glitz and glamour lasted for a while. But as I settled into my daily work, as I started to actually sort of calm down from that initial experience and started thinking about marketing campaigns and sitting in brainstorms more and more, I really started to feel like, especially where I was working, so many of the senior leaders around me would talk about marketing in a very manipulative way. So the conversation wasn't about how do we create value for customers, how do we create a true sense of connection. It was how do we manipulate on the subconscious level, almost like a Freudian way of getting people to buy more stuff that they possibly never needed in the first place. So this was the logo for my small agency. So we were contracted by all these big ad agencies. We specialized in design and motion graphics. And at the time, my 23-year-old brain didn't comprehend this, but our logo was actually a rabbit with a carrot dangling in front of it, forever out of reach. And our sort of motto that we talked about a lot was create desire. Not create value, not connect, not inspire, but create desire where there was no desire in the first place. And now that I think back on it, I'm like, well, my bosses were probably either psychopathic, evil people or had really good sense of humor to create that logo, right? Because, man, I tell ya. So about a year and a half into this job, I just start realizing, like, I can't do this anymore. And the straw that broke the camel's back was I was working on a Clinique commercial. Clinique is a popular company, makeup line, makeup company, and my entire job for a whole month was to animate a bubble going across the screen. And every day I would come in, and there would be more notes from like the creative director, the boss of the creative director, the senior blah, 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 about the highlight on the bubble, can you please move the bubble 10 pixels to the right? Every day for 30 days. I did this, and finally I said, no more. I cannot be a part of this type of work because I know that there are people in the world who have real needs, and there are companies out there in the world, nonprofits included, that are doing tremendously meaningful work. And here I am moving a bubble across the screen for an entire month. Like, I'm getting paid, but this is soul crushing. And so at this time, I start kind of on the DL, sneaking early out of work and signing up to volunteer at every possible volunteer opportunity in New York that I could find. I pour soup at a soup kitchen. I go and log entries after 9/11 and just try and help out in any way I can to probably simply just offset the guilt that I feel about my day job. And as literally like a lightning bolt strike of God, I'm talking to my next door neighbor, where I lived in the East Village at the time. One day during all of this, while this is happening, I'm telling him how I'm feeling about my job and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life, but this is not it. And he says, you got to meet my friend named Scott. He just got back from living in post-war Liberia, which is the poorest country in the world back then. He lived there for 2 years, and now he's just come back, and he wants to start an organization to help people get access to clean water. And I legitimately said, there's people who don't have access to clean water around the world? I had no idea. Very sheltered, very naive. So I meet Scott 2 weeks later. I come to this event he's doing, and Scott is a self-proclaimed nightclub promoter turned charity founder. He, in his own words, led a very degenerate lifestyle, running around hottest nightclubs in New York City for 10 years, getting people drunk for a living, and one day had a similar crisis of conscience that I experienced and said, I need to do a complete 180 of my life. Moved to Africa, served on a traveling hospital ship, saw the need for clean water, came back and started Charity Water. And long story short, we got married, we continued to work together, we built this organization together, and we have 2 little kiddos in New York, Jackson and Emma, and like we mentioned earlier, Charity Water is now in its 12th year, and we just hit an important milestone for our organization. We have been able to serve 10 million people with access to clean water. There's still 600, thank you. Still 600 million to go, but it is happening faster and faster with more organizations getting steam. But I would say one of our kind of other contributions that I'm also most proud of to the nonprofit sector is that we really tried to revolutionize how marketing and branding was done in nonprofits. We've all seen those people with the clipboards on the side of the street. I see them in New York way too often, and we just got, right at the start, coming into Charity Water, we're like, we're not going to be those nonprofits. We're not going to cold call people. We're not going to direct mail anybody. We're not going to stand in clipboards and annoy people on the street. We're going to use sophisticated and modern marketing techniques to promote our cause. And because I was so traumatized from the meaninglessness I felt previously, I said, no piece of content is going to leave our hands and see the light of day unless it comes with the intention of creating a true and meaningful connection, or at least providing some inspiration to someone's day, or humanizing the global water issue or poverty. So every single piece of content for 12 years, I'm proud to say, I think, has come out of Charity Water with the intention of doing that, of creating more meaning. That said, as I continue to think deeper and deeper about branding, and as I start to try and teach some of the things we've learned at Charity Water, like storytelling, like the importance of just radical innovation in creativity and authenticity and really, really making that connection, I'm starting to think about, I've been doing a lot of research on why our brands still not getting it today. What is stopping many of the bigger, kind of more established brands from achieving that authentic connection? So that takes me to a study that I want to talk about. It's called the Meaningful Brands Study, and it is being continually conducted by a communications group called Havas. They're a really reputable communications group organization, and over the last 10 years, they have been surveying almost 400,000 people now around the world, asking, how do you feel about the top global brands? And they have studied about 1,800 global brands you and I would all know and recognize immediately on the aisles of our supermarket. And what they found is fascinating and kind of heartbreaking. They found that 77% of global brands today would not be missed by anybody if they were gone. So all of that effort, all of the teams, the money put in, the investment, the offices, I mean, like, if I lost my handbag, I would miss it a little bit if it was gone. But this is an entire company, a brand, and 77% of them. So there's obviously something that's not clicking. And today I want to talk about, I think, a theory of what can change and how we can change this. So obviously, if 77% are not getting it right, there's 23% getting it right. What are those 23% doing that is connecting? Well, no surprise, Havas found that meaningfulness is derived from meaningful content. If brands create meaningful content, they will be meaningful. But what does that mean? So for that, we're going to cruise on over to the work of a man named Kendall Haven. He's kind of an obscure researcher plus a storyteller. And I came across his work last year, and he talks about how the human brain is truly wired for story. So he says, when information comes into our brain, data, content, pictures, videos, words, etc., if our brain cannot wrap it up into a story that means something to us, to our life experience, to what we're struggling with at the moment, etc., our brain simply cannot absorb it. Let me give you a quick example of this. Oh, and by the way, I mean, on the converse of this, our brain is constantly looking to make sense of facts and data and bring it into a story that we can understand. So the example is this. Imagine you're standing in a coffee shop and you overhear a conversation between two people. First person says to the other, have you seen Mary recently? I haven't seen her for a few days. I'm worried about her. Second person goes, no, I haven't seen her, but I saw a blue Honda Civic parked in John's driveway yesterday. Your brain immediately starts to try and figure out, how can I piece these things together to make it into a story? Oh my gosh, are Mary and John having an affair? I don't even know if John drives a blue Honda Civic, but like your brain is off telling itself a story. Conversely, if I said that a brown dog walks by the lamppost on the corner of Broadway and Chambers Street every 32 seconds, if you can't make sense of that information and why it matters to you, your brain is going to immediately want to put it right into the trash bin because it just doesn't have time to store it. So an example of this that I want to tell you about, I read an article in the New York Times. There's a long article about the Inuit tribe in the Arctic. And this is a very ancient tribe, and they have this amazing and interesting parenting practice. They don't discipline or yell at their kids, and they do not dole out consequences. They basically do nothing that we in the Western world consider parenting. But the way that they make sure their kids stay out of danger, because they still have to obviously teach their kids how to survive and how to live, is they tell their children stories. So imagine never yelling at your child, but quietly telling them stories to scare the crap out of them so that they don't get into trouble. And this is exactly what they do. So a popular story that the Inuit will tell their kids: in sub-zero temperatures, you can't go outside without a hat on, but kids often don't want to put hats on. And so the parents will say, if you don't put a hat on, the northern lights will chop your head off your body and use it as a soccer ball. And that is a legit story that they tell their kids. First, I thought, this is insanity. They're not only terrifying them, they're also lying to them. But I also immediately and quickly came to the conclusion that, like, all of this marketing research and all these sophisticated tactics, and still the simplest, most basic thing works, which is story, to make an impression, a meaningful impression on these little kiddos. And obviously it's worked because they continue to do it generation after generation. So that's the summary of Kendall Haven's work. He says, if your brain can't turn something into a story, it will simply have to put it into the trash. It'll simply have to ignore it. It'll be forced to. And yet there are so many pieces of marketing material today, some of which I will show you now, didn't take me long to find them, that are not creating enough meaning, that are not resonating with anybody, they're not telling stories, they're, I don't want to use any bad words, they're they're really trash-worthy only, I think. So let me show you a couple of examples. This is one I found after just a couple of literally Googling, like, what are some ad campaigns by some brands? Diesel, you'll create more, be stupid. And I stared at this for a couple of minutes, and I was like, what are they trying to say here? What is the meaning here? I could not figure it out, you guys. And I apologize if anybody in this room had anything to do with these campaigns. I'm sorry. We've all done stupid things. But this is another one. Smart may have the brains, but stupid has the balls. And like they're using the most overused marketing tactic, which is putting pretty girls into their photos, and this one happens to also be naked, but like Donald Trump put pretty girls into his campaigns. Adolf Hitler did that as well, and also so did the tobacco industry. So don't do that. It's really overused. Another one is these like corporate wars between Burger King, McDonald's, AT&T, and Verizon. It's like, who really wants to see a feud between two companies in public? It's like watching your two best friends fight over dinner. No one enjoys that. And then there's like Porsche, just that thinks that it's a good idea to offend their customer as much as possible, and maybe then they'll buy their car. I think this is an old one. I'll give them a little bit of slack, but finally, then there's things like this where a car company will just talk about themselves the whole time. And we're like, okay, so you won Best Award SUV. Oh, sorry, I can't read the text far away, but the cars that talk about the awards that they've gotten. I'm like, well, I don't really care about your award. I care about whether I can fit my 3 kids and my grandma comfortably in the back seat. Like, tell me that I can do that, and then you're speaking my language. So finally, this is the last one, second to last one. This is the toilet paper company out of the UK called Andrex. Found this after a couple of Googles. They decided that it would be a really good ad campaign to ask people how many of them scrunched their toilet paper before they wiped their butt versus how many of them folded it. And then they went as far as to ask what your poop is like, whether it's like a log or a can of soup. And here's what I don't understand. It's like, the marketing executives and the CEO of this company, he goes home on the weekend and he kisses his kids and he goes and visits his elderly grandma and the elderly people home. He has friends over for barbecues on the weekend. He lives a simple human life like we all do, and then he comes into work in the morning and it's like he's hit with it's like they sign off on campaigns like this and assume that people are going to make a human connection with this. And then, of course, there's things like this, which just immediately go into the trash can of our brain. So as I've thought about, okay, I think it's time we have to redefine some of these terms and what they mean. So I started by thinking, okay, what is brand? How can we define brand that's conducive to creating brands that are actually meaningful? And I came up with this definition that I quite like. I think a brand is a story that's always being told. So if we think of our brand as a story that is always being told, begs the question, well, what's a story? And that brings me to Joseph Campbell's work, who wrote The Hero's Journey and basically says that every single good story that we know and love follows a very defined framework. And I'm going to simplify it for us here today because there's a lot more components to this framework, but it basically boils down to this. Every good story must have a hero who is faced with a challenge, an existential and important challenge at that. Every good story, the hero has a guide that helps them overcome that challenge, and at the end, the hero is transformed. They emerge transformed and changed. If they're not transformed at the end of the story, it's not a good story. So every single movie that we all know and love, from The Great Gatsby to Moneyball to Harry Potter to Frozen to Lion King to Titanic, follows essentially this formula. Let me prove it to you by using my friend Moana. So I have two kids again, sorry. Moana is the hero in our journey, and her existential challenge comes when she learns that the heart of Te Fiti has been stolen. Maui is her guide to help restore the heart of Te Fiti and basically put the earth back in its proper order. She goes on this huge adventure. Maui helps her do this. She gets it done, and then she emerges transformed, victorious, and leads her people to their destiny. Same with Hunger Games. Katniss Everdeen is the hero, and her challenge comes when her sister is picked for a tribute, so she volunteers instead. She becomes the tribute and plays in the Hunger Games. Haymitch is her guide who teaches her everything he knows because he was victorious in the Hunger Games prior to this. This is the Woody Harrelson character, and she emerges transformed, victorious. She provides district for all of her. She provides food for her entire district, and she becomes the hope of the world. So the transformation here is incredibly impactful and important to these stories. And I have been long an admirer of a friend of mine, Don Miller, who actually uses this framework in his workshops, and he wrote a book called Building a Story Brand. So he was the first one to sort of start talking about, hey, we can apply this same framework in stories to branding, and here is how. So Don teaches, number one, the biggest mistake brands make is they think they're the hero, just like in that Honda commercial. And when they do that, they come up with things like this, which is another Porsche ad. Sorry, Porsche, but this is like all about us. Nobody's perfect, but we're number one and we're number two and we're so great. And like nobody, it's not attractive and it doesn't make anybody feel good, I think. So the important thing I think we need to remember, and this is what Don Miller teaches in Building a Story Brand, is first we need to take our brand out of the hero spot and put ourselves in the rightful place of the guide. So our brand becomes the guide. Our hero then becomes the customer. And when we look at things this way, our job then becomes, as marketing people, as builders of brands, to figure out what is our hero, our customer's deepest challenges as it pertains to what we do, to our business, and how can we solve them. And what kind of a transformation can we actually promise and deliver on to our customer. And that transformation, the bigger that transformation is, in essence, like the more meaningful that transformation is, not just, well, you used to have these shoes, but now you're going to have slightly better shoes, but Nike, you're going to be a victorious person. You're going to know what it's like to taste victory. That's a way better transformation. So I want to use like the example of JetBlue. There's thousands, of course, but I came across a piece of content that I quite liked, so thought I would use JetBlue, and even though airline companies are notoriously controversial, but I think this works. So in JetBlue's case, their hero is the traveler, and JetBlue's decided that the challenge they're going to speak to is not that flying is expensive, not that flying is ABC, but their specific challenge that they're going to speak to is that flying is stressful. They're positioning themselves as the guide, and they have a mission. It's actually written in their mission to humanize travel and make travel fun. And here's how they go about it. Also, and again, this is sort of following this, but I think that if we can't just keep telling the same story, right? So the story we tell, we have to continue to come back to the overarching story doesn't change, but we must learn to tell that story of our brand from 1,000 different angles. The angle of a parent, the angle of a student, the angle of, the busy traveler, CEO, founder. So if JetBlue continues to tell all these stories from all these different angles, but never changes their promise, their brand promise, which is to humanize travel, that's what they have done, and that is why their brand is successful. That's why their brand has staying power and is creating meaning. So this is specifically, I'm about to show you a 2-minute ad, but this is JetBlue talking specifically to parents, and the challenge that they're identifying is that flying with children is incredibly stressful and scary. JetBlue, as the guide, says, we're going to help parents not just feel a little bit better or a little bit less stressed when flying with children. We're going to go above and beyond. We're going to let parents know that they're so insanely welcome on JetBlue flights if they have babies. So many of you, I'm sure, have seen this ad, but it's worth watching again because it's so freaking cute. Oh, and it's not going to play. Oh, no. Is there a video there by any chance? There was, but maybe there's not anymore. Well, I will tell you about it because it's really cute. So JetBlue essentially sets up this social experiment where they start in a mom's bedroom, and she's packing with her baby, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed out. It's the first time I'm flying with him. He's 9 months old, and I don't know how it's going to go. And so the camera follows this mom, and she gets on this flight, and this is obviously staged and a little bit fictional, but it's still so beautiful. And the flight attendant gets on the microphone as everyone's buckling their seatbelts, and she says, on this JetBlue's flight, we have a very special announcement. Every time there's lots of babies on this flight, and we know that when babies cry, it's stressful for all of us, the parents and everybody around. So it's a New York to California flight, and they say every time a baby cries, you're going to earn 25% towards a free ticket, every single person on the plane. And so there's 4 babies, the babies cry, each baby cries one time, and at the end, everyone's clapping because finally, the entire plane essentially gets a free ticket. And I don't know if they actually, how many of you seen this ad? It was a Mother's Day ad a couple of years ago, but I thought it was so beautiful because they started in this mom's bedroom. They didn't talk about JetBlue for the first minute. And then at the end, the tagline is "You above all," which again is JetBlue cementing in the fact that they really do try to consider the customer above all. So let's see. Okay, this is the next thought I wanted to kind of share, and we're getting close to the end now. I'm sorry if it's a little bit long, but when the transformation promise is really audacious and really meaningful and important, essentially, if JetBlue was to say, "We promise you a slightly less stressful flight," blah. We promise to humanize travel and make it fun, way better. So the transformation in stories, when, if Moana kind of emerged a slightly better person, it wouldn't be as good of a story, but she changes so dramatically over the course of the movie. That's what makes movies epic and great, right? Think Harry Potter, think Star Wars. The characters go through these tremendous transformations, and I believe that in branding it works the same way. If your brand can promise and deliver on a big transformation that touches humans' hearts at a more existential level, not just talking about the value of your product or how fast your car is or how many RPMs it has, but talking about how it's going to make people feel, right? Seth Godin has this great quote. He says, "We don't care about what you make. We care about how it's going to make us feel." And again, humans are meaning-making machines, so we make meaning out of it. And so we have to, I think this is where the fun part of branding comes in, and the creativity and the humanity of it is we can position our brand any way we want. So and then our job is really just to lean into that as much as possible and tell stories around that and tell stories from different angles around that. And of course, to illustrate that, I've invited 4 of my close friends, Nike, Airbnb, Starbucks, and WeWork. Sorry, I'm gonna have to take you off the slide probably pretty soon, but Nike says, I'm going to kind of turn here just to make sure I don't miss this. But so, right, Nike sells shoes, and they don't talk about shoes. We know this, right? Nike speaks to the hero and their challenge. And what have they identified that to be? They've identified that to be people don't think they're athletic, and they don't think they can do it. Nike says, you can do it. They actually say, do it. And they say, we will inspire greatness within you. If you use our gear, if you buy our shoes and put on our sweaters, we will inspire greatness within you. Speaking to one of human beings' sort of most primal needs is to be meaningful and great. So Airbnb says hotels are cold. Their hero, their customer thinks hotels are cold and impersonal. Airbnb says, if you rent with us, we will make sure that you feel like you belong anywhere you go around the world. And they happen to be in the business of just renting houses. Starbucks, same thing. People crave connection. Starbucks says if you open the door of a Starbucks anywhere in the world, you'll feel a small sense of community and just a little bit of that feeling of knowing where you are and feeling like you're connected. And WeWork, well, I guess we'll talk about them. Poor WeWork. Says, starting businesses is hard, but if you work within our offices, we will not only help you build a business, but we'll help you make a life. So this is what great brands understand, right? They understand that it is so much more about the connection and not the transaction. Great brands don't talk about their customers like customers. They talk about their customers like humans. They talk to them like humans. They don't look at them with numbers on their heads. And to illustrate this, I just pulled 2 emails from my inbox. Wasn't hard to find. One of them is talking to me like a customer. Says, just hours left, 2-day deals up to 67% off. Hurry, quantities are limited. Shop the deals. I'm not sure why they chose 67% off. Is it like a new marketing psychological number now? But that email goes immediately into the trash of my brain. I don't know what to do with that, and it makes me feel icky. But the email on the right is by FrameBridge, and they chose to just dig a little deeper and find a micro story to tell. And they said, my mom read that babies see red first, so she always wore red to bond with me. And it makes sense for FrameBridge because the thing you do with frames is you frame these special moments. 2 marketing emails couldn't be more different. One is treating me like a customer, one is treating me like a human. And on that note, the second thing that great brands really do differently and understand is this one wants me to buy now, obviously. This one wants to build a relationship with me, which is what I believe is the biggest difference. Great brands understand that it is about building that relationship, not just getting that transaction. The first one might actually get me to make the transaction faster, but it's not going to build that relationship over the long term, and I don't think we're in a place anymore these days where we can have these short-lived relationships and have a company anymore. So this is the end of my talk almost, but I'm going to circle back to the beginning when I talked about that meaningful brands study. And one of the other things that study points out is that 55% of consumers today believe that brands will play a bigger role in shaping the culture and the future of our society than will governments. That is crazy. But also not crazy when you think about it. We're influenced by the things we buy. We put our identity into the kind of shoes we wear, the kind of sweater we buy, where we shop, what food we eat. We use our wallet to shape our identities. And I have a feeling this number is going to continue to go up. So all of us here, we have a responsibility because we're like playing with people's lives sometimes. When we market irresponsibly and we are successful and we sell a car, create desire for a car that a person didn't know they wanted, and they go further in debt to buy that car, we had something to do with that. So as I mentioned before, I have these 2 little kids, Emma and Jackson. And right now they think mommy and daddy have the answers to everything in the world. It's kind of awesome and terrifying. But in 10 short years, they're going to start looking for answers about who they are in the influencers they follow on Instagram, the YouTube videos they watch, the clothing brands that they shop with and their friends buy. They're going to start looking at brands and marketing to shape and start putting together their identity. And that is incredibly mind-blowing to me because that's where I really do think we all have a responsibility to use this incredibly powerful tool. Do you realize that marketing originated with Nazi Germany, some people believe, where Adolf Hitler used Freudian tactics to influence mass numbers of people, and then Adolf's nephew came to the US and he became the grandfather of PR using more Freudian tactics because they worked so well in the war to influence mass numbers of people to buy products. That is the power. I mean, it's a powerful, incredible tool, marketing, branding, design. And one of my favorite writers, David Berman, has this quote that I want to leave you with. He says, the same design, and I insert branding, marketing, etc., that fuels mass overconsumption also has the power to repair the world, and I think it's our responsibility to do so. Thank you very much. Again, you can find me here. I wonder how I did on time, and I don't know if we have much time for questions, but you guys can tell me that.
We're skipping Q&A for now.
Yes, perfect. I like that idea.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Victoria.
you.
That was amazing.